Creating branded experiences in an increasingly fragmented digital environment is both a challenge and an opportunity. Often an afterthought. On cross-platform media projects, branding should be one of the most important elements, providing the connective tissue that completes the service, journey, and connects all the dots. Welcome to Brand User and Interface Challenges and Opportunities.
Well, first off, I just want to thank everybody for coming out to see us this morning. I'm personally very honored to be here. I started coming to ProMax about 15 years ago, right around the time I started Perception. And we're kind of a unique design studio here in New York. We began in your world, in broadcast design and graphics. We spent many years designing promos, on-air identities and campaigns for HBO, ESPN, Showtime, pretty much worked with every major network at some point or another. But over the years, we gradually evolved into the feature film world. And in 2009, we had a big game changer for us, I suppose, with Iron Man 2. And what happened with Iron Man 2 is all the work we did in the film was centered around designing Tony Stark's digital interfaces, all his gadgetry around his house, his glass smartphone, creating an entire ecosystem out of all of these pieces of tech. And right after that film came out, literally a week later, we started getting calls from big technology companies, real technology companies like Microsoft and IBM, who wanted to collaborate with my team on real-world UI, UX challenges. They were drawn to our cinematic vision for what we did in the movies, and they wanted us to try to apply that to real technology challenges. So in the last 6 or 7 years, Perception really straddles these two parallel worlds of science fiction and science fact. We spend half the time working in feature films, all centered around interfaces for mainly superheroes. But the bulk of the time is actually spent on real technology, user experience challenges, prototyping future visions for companies, products, and brands. So with that said, I have a short montage just of the film work, which I'd love to play for you guys. Thank you. So one of the things that's most interesting when designing for feature films and these characters is how much the technology that we're creating needs to be a reflection of who that character is and indeed what their personality is. Marvel sort of has this unspoken hierarchy of coolness, of tech coolness, where Tony Stark is the top of the food chain. And when you design anything for a Marvel film, his stuff always has to be the most forward-looking, the most bleeding edge, the most visionary. They really see him as the modern-day digital Da Vinci. So in a way, designing tech and UI for him has to almost be artistic and organic and feel almost painterly in some degree. Everybody else has to be a notch or two below him. So, for instance, when we were designing Nick Fury's heads-up display in Winter Soldier, they immediately said, this is too cool for Nick Fury. We had to bring it down a notch. We had to make it more militaristic, more utilitarian. You know, this guy's all business. He's on a mission. He doesn't really have time for flourishy graphics or anything that's just unnecessary. And then below him would be just shield monitors, which populate these screens everywhere, and that's all pure data visualization. So in a way, audiences today, when they go to see films, are learning about the characters not just through their costumes and their dialogue and their actions, but it's through their tech. Subconsciously, audiences are getting to see a whole other side of people without it having to really be spoken, just through the devices they use, the interfaces, the wallpaper on their phone, what have you. So the other part of our business, which is actually more dominant, is working with big technology companies, and that work really derives directly from the movies. And what we often are assigned with doing is creating vision videos, prototyping the future for a specific technology company, prototyping a product category or a product that might not even exist 10, 20, 30 years into the future. And so much of what that is really about building stories and prototyping new technologies, new use cases around personas, which are really the same thing as a character in a film, and making these mini movies to sort of showcase to corporate leadership and decision makers what might be with this technology, how it might play itself out in a certain use case, whether they greenlight it or they just put it on a wall somewhere in a conference room as a North Star for the company to head towards at some point in the future and inspire their engineers. So much of what we do is about telling these stories, and it carries over from film to technology seamlessly. The last thing I just want to mention that we do a lot of in terms of real technology UX is what I like to call bringing some soul to an interface. And what I mean by that is the idea that an interface is a living, breathing organism, and a lot of what we do is imbuing personality into it, giving it life. You know, the idea that you could take something that's relatively flat, boring, and uninspiring, and just with a little bit of animation, a little bit of design thinking, we can bring it into a whole other level and make an ordinary user experience something extraordinary and really connect with the user on the other end. So now I'm going to pass it to Dewey.
Just maybe one quick question, because sure. I'm curious. How formalized is your brief when you work on any of these characters, or is it really more of a conversation?
It really depends. A lot of times we're given a sheet from a screenplay, and we have to understand exactly what the story on that page and what we need to tell is doing. Other times we're given an entire scene that's already been shot. And for instance, Iron Man 2, they'd already shot Robert Downey Jr. with a piece of glass for his phone. And he's a brilliant improvisational actor, but he had no logical sense to what he was doing on this piece of glass. He's just, you know, doing his thing. So it's a lot easier than it actually is to make sense out of that essentially nonsense and create some kind of logical interface that connects the dots between his gestures. And it's more than just creating something that looks cool. It actually has to tell a story. That's a really important scene in the film where he's actually using his phone to hack into his arch nemesis' PowerPoint presentation in the courtroom, if you guys remember the scene. So we really had to make sure that the audience was following along what his gestures were and connecting those dots with storytelling graphics.
To what degree do you actually have to negotiate what you call science fiction and sort of anticipate the future or see where it can go in terms of actually sort of becoming usable?
Yeah, I mean, excuse me. So everything we do has to be grounded in some sort of reality. There's sort of this notion that if you go too far ahead of what the current technological climate is, meaning all of our collective understanding of what's technologically feasible today, if you go too far ahead of that, you're just going to create confusion. So the sweet spot is really blending the science present with the science future and finding some midpoint in between so that audiences will still believe it and it feels authentic, but it's just a little bit beyond where we currently are. And it's interesting because filmmakers want the stuff we do in movies to look as real and authentic as possible because audiences are so savvy and sophisticated. They can look at a film now and instantly say that's just completely BS. So filmmakers want things to look more real, and then the tech companies that come to us want things to look more science fiction. So it's this kind of this strange duality where, you know, the real wants to look fake and the fake wants to look real, that we're constantly feeding off of it. Another thing that we're actually working with an automaker currently is haptic feedback, and being able to give feedback to a driver without them having to look anywhere, but just by feel, whether it's feeling a surface in the car or actually in-air haptic feedback where they're getting sensations that are being projected through the air on their hands. So again, they don't get distracted while they're driving.
You guys are all blending a lot of different skill sets. There's motion design, there's sound design, there's UI design, there's kind of even traditional branding design. How do you guys kind of staff your teams? Who do you guys hire? And then also, who do you guys kind of promote up to leadership? What kind of design skills really translate to lead teams?
I mean, your team is really After Effects sort of people.
Yeah, our team is, we're a small group. We're about 12 people. We scale up and down for particular projects as necessary, but the core is all creatives. It's all designers, animators, UX strategists, and then a smaller group, about a third, is project managers that actually run the projects and support the clients and make sure that everything is going smoothly. But all of the artists at Perception are really multifaceted. They all have a lot of different skills, whether it's animation, design, typography, UX, but each one sort of has something special about them. You know, they have their own individual specialty, but they can certainly be chameleons and lend a hand across a wide range of needs. So we're always looking for new people to come in that have something that the team currently doesn't have, and that way it sort of raises the tide for everybody.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for your time.